All right, so talking through what we're getting ready to do. When we did chapter 3, we actually did chapter 3 and chapter 12, section 2 together. Those problems that were, I'm sure, your absolute favorite, when we had like 6 graphs to do the whole problem. And to do it, transform it, do it again. You know what I'm talking about? That was chapter 12. So like we graphed it, residual plot, transformed it, graphed residual plot itself, got better, graphed it, residual plot again. So those two, chapter 3 and chapter 12, are very, very connected. We now take hypothesis tests and connect it back to everything we did in chapter 3. In order to do that, we need to go and remember chapter 3. So basically today is, hey, remember chapter 3. So we talked about the problem. The initial sentence says there is some evidence that drinking moderate amounts of wine helps prevent heart attacks. That tells us which one is our explanatory. That makes the alcohol from wine our explanatory, and the deaths from heart attacks be our response. So what we've done so far is just typed all of your alcohol from wine values in your list 1, and then all of your deaths due to heart disease in list 2. That's all based off of explanatory goes in list 1, response variable goes in list 2. Everybody with me at that point? Okay. So we're going to now go through doing all of this. Time-wise, I'll probably start going through stuff and then let us go back and do graphs at the very end. So you're going to end up sketching a scatter plot of the graph, but for now, let's pull it up in our calculator so that we're kind of stepping through this. How do we pull up a scatter plot in our calculator? Where do we definitely need to go if we want to graph something? Yeah, but where do we go before that? Second stat plot. You'll do the option that looks like a scatter plot. What do we have to make sure that is correct? List 1, list 2. X is list 1, Y is list 2. So when everybody go ahead and graph this with me in their calculator so that we're making sure we do it all correctly. And you should end up getting something that looks something like that. Well, now mine has, yours should look something like that. Everybody with me? Now, talking back to what I just said really, really quick about how when we did chapter 3, we transform and combine and all that stuff. This to me looks like it has a little bit of a curve. So this is probably one of those that we would have actually like graphed, saw an issue, and then kept moving. But we're not going to talk about that portion of things right now. So we're going to go back and do part A in a second at the end. But to save time, I'm not going to do it yet. Part B says find the least squared regression line and plot it on the graph, which is what I had just done here. So how do I find that? Yes. So this is all review. See if you can figure out where it came from. Now I'm pulling up my calculator, but I don't have the numbers typed in, so I can just show you where it is. Anybody remember where we went to find that? Something with stats, so let's go to, and you said the right thing. Somebody said it right. What's the difference between 4 and 8? Okay, my calculator will not connect. So stat calc, we're there. We have an option here that says LNREG AX plus B. We have an option at 8 that says A plus BX. Which one did we do? We did 8. We did the one that is. So in an equation, X is my explanatory variable. So what's the value that gets connected with X? In an equation, Y equals AX plus B, A is my what? No, because it's beside of X. Slope. So when I'm using the 8 equation, now what is A? This is my y-intercept, and B is my slope. So you're going to stat calc 8. It just asks you, hey, where's your X list? Where's your Y list? You type that in, which is list 1, list 2. And when you do calculate, it's going to give you, like I said, I don't have the numbers typed in, so I can't pull it up right here. But what do you end up getting? A is 270 something. What? And then what is slope-ish? Does that make sense based off of what we have right here? So it looks like mine, 0 would be somewhere about here. So 270 sounds about right. Why does your slope seem correct? Because it's negative. This output is going to look a little bit different than we're used to, but we've seen a chart that looks very similar to this part. So where it says intercept, this is our intercept. Line is my what? Explanatory. The number that goes beside of your explanatory is your slope. So we end up getting a chart that looks like this. The printout that we had was like a black and white printout. It looks a tiny little bit different, but I'm kind of trying to make the connection as we go along because I'm going to come back to that. So are these the same numbers that you got, this 270 and this negative 24? Yes. All right, so let's go ahead and write that. So with part B, now this is the first part is really, really important. How do we start the answer to this equation? If I'm writing an equation, I start with what? So it's usually a y equals equation, but we have to start with y hat. And now, stuff that I'm going over right now is on your test. Like today's stuff is on your test, a lot of it is. So make sure that you are paying attention. What does the hat mean? Estimated or predicted. So this is, we said we do the a plus bx equation. So our a value is the, and then so we usually just go to 4. So what am I, 3848? And then what? Anytime I write that equation, it's the first time I've written it, what do I need to do along with that equation? So what is x? And we want to be specific here because it's the first time I'm defining it so I can use it throughout. So we would actually want to be as wording specific as possible. What is the problem talking about with this? With the y variable. So I would start at yearly and go all the way to where it says person. This says alcohol, the other one says wine, right? Oh. Oh, I see it now. So all of that is your explanatory variable. Now, again, this is a very fast chapter. Everything we go over today is going to be on your test. Like at least 20% of your test is what we go over today, I would say. That's a guesstimate. There's a lot on there. What does y hat need to start with? And I usually tend to write predicted. I don't care if you have estimated. And then your category, which again is right there defined right after this and then so that it's yearly deaths due to heart disease per 100,000 by nation. And now you could graph a scatter plot. Could you draw that line on a scatter plot as well? If you had a scatter plot drawn, could you draw? So going back to this one, that even though I know I already have it done, I'll do it without the line. So what could I use to graph it directly on here? So like if this is my graph in front of me, where do I start with my line? Say that again. All right, yes, so what do I do here? So do I plug in these numbers or these numbers? The y numbers or the x numbers? The x numbers. Well, now if I graphed a 0, which I probably would with this one, I would know that the value at 0 is what? The 270, because that's our y-intercept. So wherever this one goes to 0, I'd probably do that as one of my dots. I pick any other number, so probably something over here like 8, plug it in, and then get those 2 points to make my line. This is wherever 270 is 0. This is whatever the value of 8 plugged in into my equation gives me. We go with that. I'm trying to go over things that are issues and take a little bit of time on those. Yes, no, I'm not getting much back. This is yes, this is no. Okay. Some of you are just out. All right, so part C, interpret the slope of this line in the context of the data. Do you remember how to interpret slope? Actually, let me go through pieces and then we'll go back and do interpret stuff. Which one is the slope? What is the slope? The negative 24 number. We're going to come back to interpret then. D is interesting because we didn't talk about this one a whole lot before. It says calculate and plot. What do you think that thing means right there? It's number, comma, number, so we know it's a what? A coordinate. The x coordinate is what? What does that thing right there mean? The mean of the x's. Can I figure out the mean of my x's? How? Stat calc. And let my calculator do it for me. So let's do it real quick. What's stat calc? Stat calc, find the mean of list 1. What's the mean of my list 1? What is the mean of my list 2? Okay, so almost 3.0 and a little bit over 195. Three point zero, a little over 195. What happens there? Where is that point? On the line. That's always the case. That is not something we talked about the first time around, but the mean of the x's, the coordinate of the mean of the x's and the mean of the y's is always on that line. I would write something about that along with the numbers I wrote on the board for your part D. So we notice at the point it falls on our regression line. And that's our coordinate. All right, so part E, part F, correlation coefficient of determination. I'm hoping that at least some of you remember what these two are. People get them confused, but you should not. What is correlation coefficient? R. What is coefficient of determination? R squared. I would definitely write those beside of it. Where do I come up with those answers? When you did the LinReg, it should be there. And if it's not, then I just need to change something, a setting on your calculator. Just to make sure that we're doing this right, go ahead and go back to stat LinReg. Now, the stuff I'm running is a little bit different than what you have on a calculator. I'm still going to get the same numbers. We should end up with, now, this R squared adjusted is one that's usually on the output, but I said we don't deal with it. But R squared is also there too. So you should get an R square value of something like 0.7296. It's second catalog, and then you're like in alphabetical order, so you can go straight to D, and you go to diagnostic on, and you'll hit enter. Okay, so second catalog. All right, so I'm going to show, if anybody gets to the point where they can't see it, I need to do this on the video anyway. So if you go to second catalog, which is 0, which is where I am now, you're already in the top right-hand corner has an A, which means you're in the alphabet mode. So you hit D, which is the matrix button, which will just skip you ahead to in alphabetical order to the D. And then you go to diagnostic on, and then you'll click enter, and all it'll say is done. And then at that point, when you go right back to it, it'll be there now. And it wasn't there before. Oh, sorry. Forget it's not live. Now do I need to do any buddies? But I wanted that in the video, so I'm glad you asked about that. Thank you. Now that is something which, and usually I remember to do this, but like on the day of the AP exam, that is something I need to make sure that I like do with all of you. Because if you get to the AP exam and somebody's cleared your calculator and it's not there, that's not good. So like, I want you to remember to do that with calculator. So that's something to remind me on day of. So our R squared value now should be 0.92 or 0.7296. Now yours looks different than what mine is up there, but your R squared value should be that, correct? Yes, everybody's that. Okay. This output doesn't give me R, but if I know R squared, how do I get R? Square root. But what do you notice if you have R in front of you? R is definitely what? Negative. Well, how would I know that? How in the world would I know that R is negative? Because the graph is negative. My slope is negative. Those are the two things. The graph itself will show negative, and your slope will be negative. Your slope, your R, and the direction of your graph are always the same. They're either all positive or all negative. Slope, R, and direction of the graph. So we're going to eventually do a residuals plot, but let's go through in pieces and talk about how to do a residual in the first place. Yes. We would have to do that right now. Mine, I just did. Okay. So let's do residuals together really quick. Where's my data right now? In a what? In a list. So let's go to our lists. So we're here. So I've got it in list 1, list 2. What do I do from there? I need to put something in list 3. Let's talk back. Residual equals what? Yes. What is, no, wait, no. Chi-square. What is the top part of your equation for chi-square? That is the same thing that it is. So residual is observed minus predicted, and that's it. This is going back to chapter 3. So I have list 1 and list 2. My list 1 is my X, which is my explanatory. My list 2, is that observed, predicted, or neither? That's my observed. So right now, this is my list 2. Well, I don't have this right now, so I need to get it. Well, what conceptually gives me my predicted values? The least squared regression line. So what am I going to do here? So highlight up here at list 3, and then I type in starting at what? The 270. So 270.3848 minus 24.7093. What do I plug in as X? Everybody with me? So I am plugging in my least squared regression line equation into list 3, starting at 270.3848 minus 24.7093. And instead of typing X, where are my X's? My X's are in list 1. And then when I hit enter, it's going to fill them all for me. So my list 3 right now, so we don't have to do the one where we're like transforming everything, but I still like to do this to help me. Right now, what's in my list 1? What's in my list 2? My Y's are which are my observed, because I like to think about it the way I'm thinking through it there. What's in my list 3 now? So what am I going to put in my list 4? Which will give me my So I'm highlighted with L4, and I type in L2 minus L3, and then hit enter, and it fills all of my residual values for me. Anybody questions, calculator questions, anything at that point? Now I'm going pretty quick, but remember that I'm just going to post this video, so like pieces that you missed out on, just go back and watch those pieces. So in a scatter plot, here? What goes here? And just so that, like, for my notes, where is this? In my calculator? Where is this? So when I do a residuals plot, now I always draw a scatter plot like this. Now, if it's positive, negative, that could change. But how do I draw a residuals plot a little bit different from when I start? So, category-wise, what is going to go here? And what goes as your x-axis, whether you write it down here or up there? So again, where are these? Where are these? So we're just doing a graph of L1 versus L4 to get that graph. So let's do it real quick. So we're second stat plot. I'm still clicking on the one that looks like a scatter plot, but now I'm just switching list 1 versus list 2 to be list 1 versus list 4. Now, sometimes it's probably not going to show up like this. And I do what? Zoom 9. And that is now your graph. Questions at this minute with anything calculator or anything getting to residuals plot? Yeah. Back to your, like, you didn't have it when you did CalcReg, or you don't know where to get it. Second catalog, which is 0. And then you'll go down to diagnostic on and hit enter. Yeah.
When did you put the list 4?
List 2 minus list 3. After you put your observed in list 3. All right. With G says sketch and interpret the residuals plot. I don't want you to do anything with interpret, so just mark out where it says and interpret. Like, I want you to think of interpret like an interpret sentence, and I don't want you to get confused with that. So with G, mark out where it says and interpret. H says, what is the sum of the residuals? Now, I could do this, but don't. How can I get my calculator to do this for me? One variable stats, but don't do this. You should know this answer. Maybe not off the top of your head because it's been since chapter 3, but what kind of residual is this? Very general. What kind of residual do I get here? What kind of residual do I get here? So you're going to have positives, you're going to have negatives. What are they going to end up doing? And what is your sum of your residuals going to be? 0. That's what makes the line where it is. It's that tug of war thing that we started with in chapter 3 where it's like it pulls this way and then pulls back. That pull cancels out to figure out where that line ends up. So the sum of your residuals is always 0. Part I says if the country of Statsylvania has a yearly wine consumption of 3.5 liters of alcohol from wine per person, what is the very important word that it says there? Expected. It could be expected or predicted. If it asks you to find the expected or the predicted, you do what? Plug it into your equation. So you are plugging in 3.5 as your what value? As your x. So 270.3848 minus 24.7093 parentheses 3.5. Yeah. And I guess I didn't write down the number. What did I end up getting for that one? 183.103. And can I check and make sure that seems right? So it's what, 3.5? And we said it's 189 something. Does that look right? Yeah, because I'm finding where on this line it falls. I don't like that graph. But I'm finding where on this line it falls, and it falls like right there.
Wait, you said the drinking was like the 270 point whatever minus 24 point whatever, and then parentheses would be
3.5.
3.5.
Yes. Questions? Let me check in a second. It's something with the way you are typing something. It shouldn't be a big issue. Very quickly, we're going to talk about interpret, and I'll end up posting these, or we'll go back to them or something. How do you interpret slope? So what does it mean? What does this line right here mean? For every one increase in x, always increase. For every one, for this problem, x will be in context, but for every one increase in x, we what? We predict that the y will increase or decrease by about slope amount. I'll rewrite these, but I want to make sure that y'all are kind of with me in the time that before y'all leave.
Do we have to put like after the by about the slope for the population, or is that just like implied?
Yes, I'll put that on there. Yes, I do on the for population. So there's going to be a lot of context stuff like you need to have for population at the end. I want to make sure that y'all are okay with the general terms of what we're doing right now. Difference between R and R squared. R squared is a very specific sentence. You usually get R or R squared like a decimal, like the 0.7296 or something. How do we usually write it though? As a percent. So is it, wasn't it 72.96? Sounds right. 72.96% what? Of the variation in, which one are we predicting? Y, because Y is going to be the one that changes. So 72.96% of the variation in Y can be explained by the least squares regression line of Y on X. Again, we're going to be plugging in context stuff there, but and
If we define it at the beginning, do we have to
correct.
keep repeating it?
No. So remember how we got super specific here about how well we wrote out X and Y. So now I can literally write my answer to interpret R squared as 72.96% of the variation in Y can be explained by the least squares regression line of Y on X, and that be my full answer because of what I wrote on the board. So defining your X and Y initially can help you a lot because then you can just write X and Y every time and not fill it in. So what instead is interpreting R? Strong is one thing, strong, weak, that kind of thing. What's another thing? Direction, positive, negative. And it only measures a what kind of relationship? Linear. So if it's curved, we're only going to measure linear for R. So this one is what, negative 0.8542. So is that strong, weak, moderate, what? That's pretty strong because we usually do like a cutoff of like 0.75 or 0.85, 0.8. So there's a strong positive or negative linear relationship between X and Y would be your answer. A lot really quick, but overall questions right now. Yes.
When you said we can just write like we can put X and Y in the interpretation, do we have to define Y if we already define Y hat?
If you define Y hat, you're fine. And I might have made you do both in chapter 3, but there's a lot of stuff like along the way, like I made you do stuff. Then like later I was like, we could have been okay without that. So if you do that, you're fine because don't only define y and then use p or y hat. But if you define y hat, then you can go backwards and use y.
And then for J.
What is J?
Conclude, can we conclude that?
Oh, what's this is an outside of chapter 3 question, but I like it. Can we conclude that wine consumption helps prevent heart attacks? No, this is chapter 4. How do we get our information? What did we do versus what we didn't do? Jay is asking if we can make a what? If we can determine what? Starts with C. Outside of chapter 3. Causation. Causation can only be found when we do a what? Experiment, which means we would have to have forced the countries to do this. Obviously, that was not the case. So your answer to J is no because of chapter 4 stuff.